Hi friends, my name is Hannah, and on my cute little channel here, I like to share the things that I'm learning about as I am just discovering how to enjoy life. As someone who's been through a lot of changes, I'm 33, I've been through, you know, recovery and homelessness and just really chaotic and not nice life circumstances and just trying to figure out you know where do I go from here, how do I enjoy life more. I don't have any diagnoses, but I do identify as being disabled and differently abled and trying to gain another sense of my identity just outside of all of the difficult experiences that life can have to offer for us. But for me, I tend to think that I've made it through the hardest part of my life. Never again will things be as difficult as it has been in the past. So I feel like it's all on the up from here. But I so yeah, that's just a little bit about who I am. But what I wanted to share is something that I'm uh a book that I'm reading. I just wanted to chat a little bit about a few of the ideas that were in the book. I'm it's an audiobook. I'm only like 2.5 hours through it. It's called On Becoming a Person by Carl B. Rogers, and it is kind of written for therapists to, from the perspective of a therapist. I don't know all that much about him, but I guess he became a leader. I don't even know what time period this is in, but at some point he was considered like a leading voice within like helping really like demonized kids who are like, you know, just called like antisocial and difficult and all this stuff. Um, but he doesn't use like disability affirming language or like neurodivergent language. So I get the feeling this book is maybe from like the 80s or 90s or something. I don't really know. But I have my notes here. I just wrote a few things to help me not forget. Um uh but he talks about this idea in general of forming and oh wait, sorry. I wanted to give more context also that I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to become a therapist. Um, Maybe someday I would like to do teaching in some kind of way, but like in the therapeutic kind of like communication related field, but not, not interested in like the psychology therapist world, or anything like that. But I have been to a lot of therapists as, I was in a lot of compromising situations growing up, just unsupported, abandoned, fell through the cracks of life, and not as bad as many other people. I feel like I've been kind of in a weird in between place in a lot of my life where I don't belong. I don't belong to any social group I've been in, kind of thing. Like I feel like I don't know. But I have been in a lot of environments where therapists, psychologists, not psychologists, but psychiatrists have been involved. And I've been, as a lot of us are, been really exposed to therapy culture and this culture of self improvement and all the, I feel really strongly about all the damages that the experiences with therapists and therapy culture and self improvement, the damages that has done to me. But so that's like my perspective I'm coming from when I'm talking about this book. But okay, so in this book, he talks about the idea of a helping relationship as being kind of the basis of relating to other people. You could And to me, I just translate that as like safe, like how to feel safe when you are in relationships with other people, like a helping relationship. Well, maybe it's called that because it's not a hurting relationship. Like it's all about how to prevent harming yourself, harming others, a harm reductive relationship where you're using communication styles and courage to harm as little as possible and hopefully bring as much joy and like bringing out the best qualities in one another and in a way that is sustainable and real and isn't just based on like behavior modification and like forming dependence and weird boundaries. So this is yeah, so he talks about the idea of a helping relationship. um uh and something he quoted, this guy I'd never heard of, someone called Martin Buber, somebody who is talking about how confirming another person is the it's the difference between treating somebody as an object, somebody just that you are only interested in them in order to mold them, and treating them as a human being where you actually feel their spirit, you enjoy interacting with them. It's kind of a two-way street, a mutual relationship. And this guy, the author, the author Carl B. Rogers, he talks about mutuality in a relationship, in a helping relationship, such as that with a therapist and a client, theoretically. He talks about mutuality more in the context of how necessary it is for a therapist to accept their own thoughts and feelings and be real with themselves about how they how they think and feel, and not feel like they're like they don't have the right to their thoughts and feelings and needs. And it does get, I know it gets muddy when you get into the territory where it's like, well, is what I'm thinking or feeling abusive or harmful? Like I've been abused and harmed by other people by what they've said and done, and I don't want to be that to somebody else. But it just reminds me, that the underlying protective quality for mutual relationships is that we aren't internalizing shame and negativity against ourselves. It's a protective thing so that we can trust ourselves. We won't internalize or harm ourselves or put negative pressures or expectations on ourselves based on what other people think and feel and say and do. And I think that perspective can help unmuddy the waters a little bit when it comes to wanting that, expressing honestly, like, and it, but so these are qualities of helping relationships, right? Where being honest about where you're at, it's really necessary for transparency, but yet, I'm kind of the mind at this point that therapy is not, I know that people, like therapy is kind of based on disabled people who are so good at being empathetic or analyzing. They're just trying to make a living, make a legitimate profession. I feel like that's a lot of kind of the basis of how therapy or therapists became a thing. It's kind of an institution, not because for the theoretical, it's kind of the praxis of what it's trying to learn, what it's trying to attempt to do in the world. And it's also creating an industry and jobs and a livelihood for people who are differently abled, especially as we've come out of the industrial age and kind of been in the industrial age. But I really feel that like the territory of therapy, it is way too focused on trying to like manufacture an emotional relationship that is based on what's the word I wrote earlier? I'm not seeing the word right here because I'm trying to scan real quick. But it's based on like something artificial, an artificial creation where a therapist and their client, they're like building this emotional bond, but and they're communicating, but they're not actually dependent on each other. Their lives aren't actually interwoven. So the relationship, the good feelings and all that is kind of inherently based on acting or based on, and it can be really good in some situations, but it's kind of inherently based on, the therapist finding joy in being seen a certain way and in accomplishing a reaction in their client and molding the client in some way and, making a living and all of that. And then, but it's like the client is motivated for their own reasons and not, it's like all these emotions and emotional expressions, but without the actual investment. And I think that a lot of it is unfair to clients and kind of also setting therapists up for failure or for sticky situations, because it's not really helping, it's not encouraging a client to go out there and like feel safe in themselves to invest their energy in a actually beneficial relationship where someone's actually invested in them like throughout their life. It's it's if I was writing, I'd be able to think of it, to say it a lot more thoroughly to all the things that keep on glimpsing through my mind, but I don't have the energy or the concentration to write really much in this season of my life, so that's why I'm talking. So I'll just try to say what I can on the surface level without getting too much in the weeds. But let's see. Yeah, that sense of in the book he talks about the trust based on being real, developing trust. This whole idea that the whole idea of why therapy is supposed to work is not because you have this is what he's saying, like not because you have the best clinical approaches or analyses or whatever, but it's because you just are able to prevent this like unconditional positive regard and encouragement for the other person to feel safe as themselves, safe to express themselves, safe to explore themselves. And the thing is, that is like, it's a dynamic that it hinges on like perfectionism for the therapist to pretend that the therapist is a non-person without their own needs and wants, and then and like boundaries, and just like likes and dislikes and just the human limitations of what we can actually feel emotionally invested in, and also the right to demonstrate like how do you protect yourself, or just like redirect things when you don't feel comfortable, but in a way that isn't damaging to the other person, or you can even control. So it's just a matter of compatibility. I'm not trying to control the other person's reactions and thoughts and feelings, but just letting them decide for themselves if it's compatible or not, and hoping that person has the inner resources to not internalize shame and self-hatred and catastrophizing upon themselves. But so he talks about trust based on being real, and that like trust and that positive regard as being essential in therapy. for the client, but it's there's just something about how therapy is it's all in the context of somebody's profession and the limitations that come with that, especially limitations towards like they are probably being treated like an object themselves, as something to mold, something to perform, not a thinking, feeling, breathing human being. They're probably being treated that way by their own job constraints to some degree. And then maybe they offset that pain by finding this position of authority and domination, even loving domination, but just a sense of being able to control and mold clients, um, and like to provide a sense of like, saving someone, protecting someone, transforming somebody. That is kind of how they offset the pain, maybe for some people. But that isn't like a healthy, or I don't know. It's if that's the model being portrayed, I think that therapists need to be real with their clients. Like, this is how I do things in my life, how my life is set up, and your circumstances are different. So you can look at me and my example, how I'm relating to you, but this doesn't mean that how I'm doing it is the right way for you according to the resources you have. And in the book, he does talk about, so far I haven't read that much of it yet, but in the book he does talk about being forthcoming with clients about your thoughts and feelings. But do any therapists really sit down and lay it all out there and say like relate as an equal human being and like reveal their own limitations? Not like in a crying, sobbing way, but what therapists out there are strong enough in themselves so that they're able to like say things simply like, these are my limitations, this is how I'm also like shackled by the same system that we are all in, the same mess up system that prevents us all from having access to resources to some degree. Here are some of my own experiences that have prevented me from, it gives me my own set of limitations and strengths. And it is good, like, yeah, you got to encourage the client to be, I do appreciate that in the book, the author talks about like encouraging the client to let their, like all their positive qualities and their desires and their thoughts and feelings come out. But that is like, it's said without a grounding example. And I can see in some instances where you might try to apply that logic to a situation where the client is actually saying and thinking, feeling things that the therapist actually doesn't feel tolerant of, but they're feeling like they have to repress themselves, or they don't want to be, hurtful. And well, I forgot what I was saying, but yeah, there's something about the perfectionism that I feel like a lot of therapists put themselves under, that they're not able to relate to clients as human beings. And I think, this guy is saying basically like, in a therapy environment, we should try to, as a therapist, you should try to basically provide like a really strong, tight platonic friendship feeling to a client, but without actually being a platonic friendship. Where a platonic meaning like you see the ideal in each other, you're like woven into each other's lives. Like, there's too many, for most people, I think, most clients, there's too many boundaries, too little it's like you can't actually feel the effects of what you're hoping to convey because it's built on artificiality. Like, people can tell something is off, and a lot of people are more likely to fault themselves or be like, oh, something's just wrong with my brain, or, but it's actually no, like, it actually is off. Like, you aren't feeling like loved or held, even though this person is doing everything they're trying to do, because they aren't actually invested. They aren't actually like a part of your life. They are only trying to portray something that they believe and think that you need in order to heal. They're trying to give you a gift that they don't actually have. It's like they see you running around thirsty looking for water, and they put on this big, like, compassionate pageantry of trying to, like, I don't know, give you psychedelics and give you, I'm saying this as a metaphor, give you psychedelics, give you um like be like, can't you taste that water in your mouth? Can't you imagine it? Like, ooh, that delicious water, those delicious refreshing water droplets. Like, they're doing this compassionately intended pageantry to try to get clients to believe and think and feel they're receiving something, but that the therapist can't actually give, because it's not an actual real relationship where you can see actually all the sides of the therapist, where the client is actually treated as an equal. Like, it's inherently an imbalanced dynamic where it's like it's like underlying it is assumed, no matter how you try to portray it or how you speak, there's always this underlying feeling that the therapist is a teacher who is higher, who is bestowing wisdom upon the client, because the client is just messed up, and so that they can become worthwhile, so they can become rehabilitated. This guy, something that really annoys me, that I feel like is really ableist in the book, he keeps on talking about so clients can, like, come to psychological maturity. It's like, who is judging these standards? My lips are really dry, I keep on licking them. But it's like, um just an imbalance of power. And I know that there's a lot worse things in the world, and that this can be an essential stage that some people go through for their own healing. But I just have a lot of I don't know, just a lot of criticisms on therapy, like, as a institution, as a culture. I love therapeutic things, therapeutic relationships. Like, I'm interested in therapeutic relationships, being able to increase my ability to take part in being involved in helping relationships, like that type of relationship where it's based on the main dimension of the relationship, like that I have with my boyfriend, for example, why it's so beautiful, and, like, it's been so healing and transformative to me, much more healing than any therapist has been. It's because it is based on that, like, platonic ideal of seeing the best in each other, and sharing ourselves, like, actually sharing what we go through, and realizing how we actually do affect each other, and having the ability to choose, and to let some people go out of our lives, and to know that we choose certain people to be in our lives, because it is really, like, it's a choice. It's not an obligation. It's like, because we actually do find a lot of beauty from the relationship. But yeah, like, to me, therapeutic relationships are completely different from therapy. And I think therapy, of course, there's so much unmonitored. It's like, it's weird. It's like you alone, secluded, not like, there's, like, I really think that every therapist should provide a recording to patients of what went on, and they should reflect on themselves. It should all be public to like the supervisors to the client to everybody, well, everybody involved, you know. But I understand that a lot of, unfortunately, like the whole tradition of therapy as an institution, it came out of this idea of like carceral procedures and kind of taking the place of like the confession, like the religious confession, like forgive me, Father, I have sinned. um it's been 3 weeks since my last confession, like trying to take the place of that, like people who are so racked with guilt, they're confessing to crimes. And I feel like a lot of, you know, the tradition of therapy is kind of based in these inherently carceral and kind of like liability machine origins. Um, but yeah, I thought it was interesting listening to this audiobook. I'm listening to it on the Hoopla app while I'm like doing puzzles and doing the dishes and cooking and stuff. Um, and I'm sure there's more that I would want to say, but I'm kind of getting tired, so I'm gonna stop it here. But if you have read this book or you have thoughts on this topic, I would love to hear about it because I'm really interested in, like, you know, just the interplay that, like, lack of resources, competing for money, like perfectionism or trying to prove worth and access to money through trying to like prove power and right to teach, like as a job, by like inherently like looking down on others or like suppressing them, the relationships between like all these things, and just like actual helping relationships and what actually feels therapeutic, and knowing for ourselves, like being empowered to know and think for ourselves, like what how our body and emotions lead us to the truth that is right for us. And that's something I do appreciate that the author was talking about also. He's talking about how he realized for himself that like truth for him is about what he thinks and feels, and only he can define what truth is for him, and that defining truth by like what he feels is it's been like, I don't know, that's just what he has concluded, that that is all that makes sense for him to do. And I do appreciate that, but you know, I'm really interested in just like communication that is like nonviolent and loving, but also like real and sustainable and compassionate of all our limitations, that we can only be who we are, like one person who's, we're not a potential of a person. We are like a real fucking person right now as we are. We're not just like, oh, I'm a potential, I could become anything. It's like, no, I'm who I am now based on everything that's come before me in the past. That is who I am now. And maybe I'm interested in different things, but all of that is going to be entirely informed by everything that came before me and that I have access to right now. And I forgot what I was saying again. Anyway, I'm gonna go, but yeah, if you think things about these topics, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Okay, take care.